Welcome to the Uncertainties of University, a podcast created for the Suffolk University Summer U Symposium of 2021. My name is Abigail Thaberge. I use she/her pronouns, and I will be your host for the next 15 minutes. Joining me will be Tara Modica, who uses she/her pronouns, and Maddy Hardy, who uses any pronouns, incoming freshmen at Suffolk University. All of our sources can be found in the description box below. During this podcast, we will explore the racism and sexism that perpetuates the standardized testing and interview portion of the college admissions process. We will have interviews with experts on college admissions, and we'll dive down deep into research that has been done exposing the prejudice of the College Board and the biases hidden within the interview process. Welcome to Episode 1, Burn Down the College Board. Trivia question. Were the SATs created by A, a racist, B, a eugenicist, C, a college professor, or D, all of the above? Surprise! It's all of the above.
The College Board was founded as the College Entrance Examination Board in 1899 and was established to broaden access to higher education. Focused mostly on the East Coast, 12 universities and 3 preparatory academies made up a collaborative board to establish a baseline of expectations that students should reach in their secondary education. However, even though the College Board was founded to standardize admissions testing, it was done so with racism at the forefront. Enter Carl Campbell Brigham, a psychology professor at Princeton University who was chosen to head the committee that would create what would become the SAT exam. In 1923, Brigham had published a book titled A Study of American Intelligence, in which he examined the IQs of black, white, and, quote, foreign, end quote, soldiers in World War II and concluded that their black soldiers scored the lowest. He attributed their lower scores to their genetics rather than their schooling or other external factors. Quote, "We must face a possibility of racial admixture here that is infinitely worse than the faced by any European country today," end quote. Brigham writes, quote, "For we are incorporating the Negro into our racial stock, while all of Europe is comparatively free from this taint," end quote. Brigham wanted desperately to prevent black Americans from reproducing and so-called, quote, tainting, end quote, the American gene pool with what he thought was a lower, quote, genetic intelligence, end quote. The heads of the College Board, then known as the College Entrance Examination Board, read Brigham's book and decided to have him head the committee to create the SATs, which then resulted in a racist and biased SAT. There are modern attempts at limiting the advantage of white students taking the standardized test administered by the College Board. However, this does not mitigate the disadvantages that minority students have because such tests were designed to bar minorities from entering higher education.
The College Board has continuously denied claims that minorities are disadvantaged by standardized testing, as evidenced by a report published in 2015. However, while disputing these claims, the College Board contradicts themselves by saying, quote, "Tests are also reviewed to ensure that items do not include racist, sexist, or offensive content or content that could be gender biased. For example, the SAT does not include information about sports or military issues because these items may put males at an unfair advantage," end quote. This quote shows that the College Board clearly doesn't understand microaggressions, as they claim not to be sexist and then state that they don't ask questions about sports or the military to not benefit male test takers. If you can't get out of the rut of gender roles, how can you claim that you have an unbiased test?
Unfortunately, the same problem arises when the author attempts to dispute the claim that the College Board is racist. For example, minority students tend to score lower on the SATs on average. Joseph A. Soares is a professor of sociology at Wake Forest University. In a journal article, he reported that, on average, women score 33 points lower than men on math sections. Hispanic and Black students score 219 and 303 points lower than white students, respectively. Low-income students score 100 points lower than median-income students, and median-income students score 200 points lower than high-income students.
Letukas attempts to state that it isn't the fault of the test by stating that, quote, differences in scores on standardized tests do not occur as a result of bias of the test itself, but rather external factors that play a role in quality education and ultimately student achievement, such as access to rigorous coursework, books and stable peer groups, family support and resources, and academic preparation. However, the College Board's logic is nullified when we look at all the barriers to taking the SATs, such as SAT prep books published by the College Board being put behind a paywall with no assistance for low-income students to afford them. Also, the author states that minority students typically receive a lower quality education, but doesn't say whether or not the exam adjusts for these factors.
Sadly, some people don't realize the sad truth about standardized tests. When Biden passed a bill that took out standardized testing, some people were unhappy. Sean Michael Pigeon, an opinionated contributor of USA Today, said it would take away students' opportunities to go to, quote, great places, end quote, and how impoverished kids won't be able to excel in society. He began his piece with an anecdote about how poor he was and how the SAT helped him, saying that, quote, testing and academic performance were the best way for someone like me to succeed, end quote. His tone completely undermines the topic on how it stems from white supremacy and switches to how there's no one to blame. He declares that, quote, blaming the test doesn't help anyone, and contrary to the accusations of cultural bias, it is the math section that is hardest for students, end quote. Pigeon believes, despite their beginnings, the tests help identify talent, and since their introduction, it has been the minorities and the impoverished that benefited from the test, going as far to bring in evidence from a screening on elementary students. Yes, kindergartners. Pigeon believes that testing from a young age weeds out the, quote, children who lack privileges, end quote, because it's perfectly normal to weed out children who get their D's and B's mixed up.
To further invalidate their claim of not being racist, Letukas even writes, quote, this claim that the SAT is biased against minority students is typically supported by the argument that the average SAT scores for certain minority groups are lower than for whites, and therefore the SAT must be biased against minorities. End quote. That's right, they score lower than whites. Someone needs to tell the College Board that we don't live in the 60s anymore and that their false allyship isn't doing them any favors. Jay Rosner, who is the vice president of the Princeton Foundation, conducted a study examining 2 years' worth of SAT data. Alarmingly, he found that only 1 or 2 questions in each section on the SAT are truly neutral questions, on which students perform equally well regardless of social class, race, or gender. The rest of the questions show significantly different results. According to Joseph Soares, every SAT includes unscored experimental questions that are given to students to see if they should be used as a scored question on the next year's test. Out of the 2 years' worth of tests used in the study, all of the experimental verbal questions that were chosen to be put on the next test have been questions on which white students perform better than black students, rather than vice versa.
The College Board utilizes the American college application process as a business arrangement at the expense of the students it supposedly serves, especially minority students. Due to the College Board's legal status as a nonprofit/charity, it does not pay taxes. However, it generates millions of dollars in revenue. It is also a private organization with a board of directors, but it receives public funding and shapes education policy. It is also a monopolistic company that controls much of the American college prep process through the SATs and AP tests. This is harmful to the students who come from low-income backgrounds. They may be unable to afford the hefty fees that come with testing necessary to apply to college, but there is no alternatives to the College Board. The College Board generates its large substantial earnings from the fees it places on standardized testing.
Prejudice against minorities is institutionalized throughout the college application process. The success of minority applicants is detrimented by the historically racist practices that continue to be implemented today, such as the SATs. Ultimately, the College Board disregards the welfare of the minority students it serves by continuing to administer standardized testing. The tests do not aid minorities in the college process. Rather, they harm them. Welcome to the segment of our podcast that we call The Roundtable, where we have a discussion with a group of college students who have experience with the college application process. Today, our subject is the racism and sexism found in the SATs and the College Board. Do you guys want to go around and introduce yourselves?
Hi, my name's Maddy. I am a freshman at Suffolk this year. I'm part of the class of 2025, and my major currently is Global and Cultural Communications, and I'm hoping to minor in East Asian Studies.
Hi, I'm Tara. I'm also an incoming freshman at Suffolk, and I'm currently majoring in psychology.
Hello, my name's Christiana. I'm a freshman at Suffolk as well, and I am a history major with a concentration in United States history.
Hi, my name's Tiana, and I'm a freshman at Suffolk, and my major right now is undecided. So, yeah.
And my name is Abby. I am also an incoming freshman at Suffolk University. I am majoring in political science with a concentration in American politics and hopefully a focus in international relations. Our first discussion question: have you or someone you know had an experience with the College Board? If so, you may be entitled to compensation. I'm just kidding. Those years are lost from you forever. For real though, have any of you had experience with discrimination during the college process?
Personally, no, I didn't really face much discrimination. Like, the only thing close to it is not having, like, a pagan option as religion. It only had, like, Wiccan, which, I mean, all Wiccans are pagans, but not all pagans are Wiccans type of thing. I still put it down, but, I mean, that's kind of the closest thing.
That's fair. I think I had... obviously, I'm a white woman, so I mean...
yeah, same.
Only go so far. But I think the one that stood out to me was when they were asking about sexual orientation on some of my applications, and I just put, do not... I forget what it was, but I think it was like... don't want to answer or something like that, just because I felt like that could lead down bad pathways, so I didn't want to sort of give them that opportunity. So I sort of left that one blank. But other than that, I don't think I had any real discrimination. Does anyone else want to add anything before we move on?
Yeah, I kind of had like the same problem when I was talking about race, because like I did apply to a couple of Ivy Leagues, and I remember there was a scandal where or I don't know exactly how real it was, but they supposedly weren't letting in Asian students because they had too much of them, and I'm Asian. So it's like, do I play the minority card, and like, will that help me get into other colleges, or is it going to hurt my chances?
Yeah, that's so sad that it's been like utilized in that way, because I feel like race is just like, it's who you are, and it's sort of, I guess, defines a little bit sort of how you grow up and all that sort of stuff. But also, like, I just feel like its role in the college application process is so much bigger than it should be. And I feel like that's definitely something that everyone needs to work together to tackle. Anyone else have anything to add before we want to move on?
I did not experience any explicit discrimination during the college application process, but I definitely, along with other contributors, questioned the necessity to put down my race.
I myself didn't have any negative experience with the college application process, but I can very much see all the holes in it. Because I don't remember what school I was filing for, but I do remember there being two questions. One of them was they come off as very pick me, because you'll sit here and you'll get those questions. Oh, we care about, the discrimination and this, that, and the third. And then, they'll have you write this whole essay on what you could do to change it. And then you're just like, okay, you fill all of this out and you still don't get accepted. They'll sit here and say, how do you think your sexuality plays into who you are? I'm like, why does that matter? Why does my sexuality matter when I'm trying to get admitted into your school? So it comes off as very pick me.
Yeah, I agree. I think there were a lot of questions like that on the college applications too. All right. Anyone else have anything before we move on to the second question? All right. Second question. Based on your own experience, do you believe that the SATs or AP exams are a good indicator of student success? I'm going to jump in here and say no. I think, and this is something that we referenced a little bit earlier on in the podcast too, but I feel like when you are taking an exam on a Saturday in some closed off classroom and you have to pay $80 to do it, you're not going to be performing at your best because you're going to be constantly stressed. And I'm a big fan of not using grades in schools anyway, so maybe I'm a bad person to ask about this. But I just feel like any given test isn't going to be an indicator of how well you'll do in college. And especially if you don't have the opportunities to prep for those exams, whether it's because you don't have access to textbooks or online resources, things like that. I just feel like they're not a great indicator of student success. I think that they can help students prepare, especially like AP classes, I think help students prepare for college, but I think the exams and the SATs are just not what they're all cracked up to be.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and more so on the AP exam note, I'm totally gonna expose myself here, and this is so embarrassing, but I have taken Mandarin since 5th grade, and I never got below an A in that class. Come the AP exam, perhaps I got a 1. I really don't know how. I felt decent about the test, but I guess I just was not adequate enough. And since I was taking the SAT in my senior year, that was kind of when COVID hit, so like every test got canceled. And I just ended up saying, you know what, I'm not gonna deal with it. And I just did not take it.
Speaking of AP test scores, I finally decided to look at my AP government score. Can we get a drum roll, please? It was a 2. But I'm not mad. I knew fully well what to expect on that exam. But what bothers me is how some of the questions were questions from the so you know how College Board had the AP student classrooms, where they would make their own tests. Some of the questions on that AP exam were the same questions that were on those tests, and I did pretty good on those tests. So I'm still trying to figure out how I made a 2, but it's okay because you know what, I took the class. That's all that matters.
See, you and Maddie make really great points though, because that's the whole like problem that I have with the AP exams is like, you can be in our school, AP classes were a year long. And so you could have been in a year-long AP class and learned this stuff through and through and gotten A's all throughout the class. And all of a sudden you take an AP exam and you get a 2 or a 3, and a college won't give you credit for it. And or they then believe that you're not a good history student, even though you took, AP government for a year, or you took AP world for a year, and all of a sudden, just because you didn't do good on that one exam that's been hyped up for the entire school year, all of a sudden now your college believes that you're a bad student. And so that's just such a poor indicator of student success. I really don't think that they are as good at predicting how well students will do as some educators think that they are.
Right. Like in my experience, I've taken 4 AP tests, and every single class, every single AP class I've been in, the test itself is like half of the class, just learning how to effectively take the test. And it takes away like so much time from actually learning the subject, because the teachers are trying to tell you like all the different strategies and loopholes and what to do and what not to do. And it really like, we're not really learning the subject so much in AP classes as much as how to like beat the system, which like, well, for one, is such a waste of time. And also like the tests themselves are formatted in such a way that doesn't test your knowledge. Especially I have a problem with AP language tests in particular. And like I took AP Spanish, and okay, can I just like rant about this, like the verbal part of it? Because
yes.
God. So they asked me to like, they give you like a set amount of time. It's like 2 minutes to like just cram as much advanced grammar and like culture into like this fake conversation or just like the speech as you can. And I don't know if they've ever had a real conversation with like an actual person, but that's not how it works. Like, I think effective communication in language doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't depend on how advanced your grammar forms are. I think it depends on how well you can get your point across. So I don't think that's accurate in testing your actual language abilities at all.
Yeah, now that you say that, I have the same exact problem with my history classes, because I took AP US history, and literally the entire class is learning how to write these different various forms of essays for your AP exam. And none of them are written the way that a college essay is written. Half of them don't even have conclusions. You pick an introduction or a conclusion. And that's just not the way that college essays are written. And so if they're really going to claim that this is supposed to be advanced placement for college preparatory and trying to get you ready to write for college and get you ready to have subjects that you're going to learn in college, you have to make sure that you're doing it in a way that will actually prepare students for college. Because if all of a sudden you're taking their 5-paragraph essay that they've written all through high school and you're telling them, look, forget it, you don't even need a conclusion, and then they go to college and have to write 12-page research papers, that's not helpful to anyone, because all of a sudden you're taking away things that they already know and telling them to do something completely different. And so then they spend half the class, like Tara said, learning how to write an essay to get a good score on an exam. So I feel like it's one of those things that like just really isn't as good as it should be. And if they are going to continue to use AP exams and continue administering them, they have to figure out how to do them in a way that is equitable to everyone and that does so in a way that truly prepares students for college.
I'm going to say one method that I liked of like the standardized testing that, looking back on it, I like, but they don't do it anymore, was, well, in North Carolina, they have this thing called benchmarks. And they weren't like your standard SOL or your standard EOG, EOC. Like, you still took those, but the way a benchmark worked was, it was a test that you took before the EOG, EOC, SOL, whatever standardized test. And that they would grade you on how good, they would pretty much grade you to see how good you would do when that test came up, to see if where they needed to help students, see if this student was even ready to take the test. And honestly, I like that idea. You're not sitting here no one's taking the food of knowledge and just cramming it into your skull and then tightly duct taping it and then expecting you to, oh yeah, you need to make sure you have all of that by the end of the school year. And I just need you to remember what you learned in August. I need you to remember that in May. I need you to remember that, okay? We're only going to talk about it once, but I need you to remember it in May, okay? Got it. With the benchmark, you learn it, and then you test it on it. I want to say right like in the middle, before May. So say if you took your test in May, you'd have like a little test somewhere between when you learned the information, your benchmark, and then the test. And I like that method. I like that. It makes, standardized testing look less, standardized testing, if that makes sense.
I definitely have many, many qualms with AP testing. Throughout high school, I took several AP tests, and unfortunately, I did not perform as well as I thought I would have. The class itself, I obtained high grades, but the test, I did not do very well. The AP test is very surface level. It really does not go in depth. It really does not test, truly, do you know the information? It tests how well can you pass this exam. And I definitely agree with other contributors. It does not prepare for college. I also took AP US History, and within it, we had essays called DBQs, document-based questions, where
I've never hated something as much as I hated my AP US History class. Oh, I'm so tired of learning about white man taking land and then just polluting it, and then learning about how history repeats itself. Okay, we get it. Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue 1492. Shut up.
There's the thing. I absolutely loved my AP US History class. It was the test that I hated. The tests, don't quote me on this, but I remember reading something where testers take about a minute to grade your papers. You cannot accurately grade an essay in a minute. You miss the nuance.
My kid used to tell me it takes a minute to grade a bad paper. But it's harder, it takes longer to grade a good paper. Like he said, he would tell us how he could look at a paper and from the first paragraph or two, he could tell whether it was a good one. So he could just start, doing the red marks. Because red marks, little swipes, red marks was easy. It's when the student has a good paper and you have to sit here and pretty much nitpick to find something wrong, which is the crazy part. Because I'm like, so you just admitted to nitpicking. So you're actively looking for something wrong because you can't see it at its face value. And I don't know if that's actually good or bad. I feel very conflicted about that statement.
Yeah, I think you all have great points. Maddie, go ahead.
Yeah, I remember my teacher telling me, like, 2 people would read your essay in a short amount of time, and then they would both assign a score, and if the scores differ, then a third judge would read it, and that would kind of, like, determine it. And I think that's just, like, such a waste of information. Instead of learning history for the value of it, I'm a very firm believer that history is like absolutely something that everyone needs to take. Some people are against that. I don't understand it. I find history fascinating and I'm like really good at it. Both my parents are like historians and I've lived with it. But when I get to these tests, it doesn't test like your knowledge and the value that you get out of learning history. It's memorizing dates, which like a general year I guess is alright, but when you're testing down to the day, the month, like why, unless it's like something that happened within like a very short amount of time and a lot happened, I don't think you really need to know that. And the writing style, it's just, if you have to have a writing style based around having readers read it fast, then don't have the questions be like that.
Yep. Does anyone want the last word before we move on to our next question, or are we all set?
I wanted to comment further on the AP testing, which I agree, it is very much memorizing dates. And within the testing, there are these very extensive multiple choice sections, which again, it does not test your knowledge. It tests, well, how well can you figure out our riddle? Which answer is the most correct? They're all right, but we want you to see which one is the most correct.
Yeah, the solving a riddle is exactly what it is. It's that you have to sort of figure out how the College Board works and how the AP exams work and sort of crack how they're written and why, rather than just focusing on the material. All right. I think that was good. I think that it's definitely important to point out that everyone has their own experience with the SATs and AP exams. Some people really enjoy them. Some people don't. Some people think that they are a good indicator. Some people don't. So again, it's important to point that out. And I think on that subject, I want to ask you all sort of what advice you have for students who are going into their senior year of high school, or students who are prepping to take SATs or AP exams next year, and sort of what advice you can bestow upon them based on what you've experienced during your time in high school.
If you're
My advice to students in high school would be, see the variety of college preparatory classes your schools offer. There's not only AP, but there's IB, there's dual enrollment. I personally was enrolled in IB, which is International Baccalaureate, and I loved it. And I thought the exams really did test your knowledge, and I was able to obtain those college credits. So definitely see what's out there.
Tiana, go ahead.
I want to say, you need to harden. You need to work like a child in a 1920s coal factory. You need to hone your knowledge on writing a paper. If you don't learn how to do anything else from that class, learn how to write a paper, because you can borderline tank on the multiple choice questions, but if your essay is crisp as a new pair of shoes, you might get a 3. You get a 3. You get a 3. It's not a 4 or a 5, but it's a 3. That's passing.
Yeah, another piece of advice. I don't know if this was like impacted by COVID at all, but something I saw a lot of this past high school year was that a lot of people in AP classes decided not to take the test because they found out that their college like wasn't accepting AP scores as credit anyways, and like why pay $100 just to stress yourself out, right? And like I didn't do that because Suffolk takes AP scores as credit, but if your college, like if you've already decided on a college and you know that they don't take AP scores as credit, don't take the test, because those students, like, they were so much less stressed than the rest of us.
My advice would be learning how to decode the College Board's questions. That is something that will screw you over if you don't know how to kind of crack their riddle. Because, again, it's not trying to test your knowledge, it's trying to see how well you can take this exam, and this exam is going to... The point of the exam is trying to make you fail. Peace and love. It's not about trying to succeed, it's just trying to, like, beat the system and figure out what the hell they're, like, even trying to ask. So I would spend time kind of learning the key words that they use and, like, what that specifically means. Really learn how to decode a question and break it down so that you have the most effective answer. And the writing style, I don't remember it. I didn't take AP World, and honestly, my AP Gov class and AP US History class did not teach me how to write for the exams. I, to this day, do not know how to write a DBQ, but that's fine. I can live without that knowledge, but if you are set on taking the exam, please learn that.
Yeah, I think those are all great pieces of advice. The one thing I would add is, especially if you're taking a history class, some teachers might tell you to memorize dates and things like that, but try to look at the broader picture. You'll notice that the College Board will break down time into periods. So especially in AP World, you'll have like period 1, which is sort of like the history of farming and agriculture and the beginning of civilization and things like that. And you'll want to focus on those connections between the periods and sort of focus more on that broader picture, because a lot of what they are theoretically aiming for in these AP classes and exams is trying to get you to sort of make those connections and to be able to say, oh, well, this caused this, or, oh, well, I saw this happening in period 2 and now it's happening again in period 4. And you can sort of draw those same conclusions and sort of have that broader worldview. So I would definitely say that that's something that will be helpful to you if you're taking an AP history class, especially, but also pay attention to what the curriculum looks like if you can find it online, because every teacher will teach it differently, but the exams will be based off of the curriculum. So it'll be helpful to you to utilize, as much as I hated AP Classroom, to utilize AP Classroom and to sort of look at what that curriculum looks like, just so you get a gist of, oh, well, this is period 1 and this is what that's about. And it sort of helps your brain categorize and break down what you're supposed to be focusing on.
Another thing I found is that, well, not that I found, that teachers taught me and I thought it was helpful, is that go for partial credit, if nothing else. If you look at a question and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to die in this desk right now, then just try to state as much as you can, even if it's like terribly, terribly obvious. Like I think for like AP Calc especially, there were definitely some questions where I was looking at them and I was like, there is no way I could ever solve this. So I just like wrote like the most obvious equations I could and hoped that that would get me something at least. And I was pretty happy with my score afterwards. So I don't know if it was because of that, but I'd like to think that that helped. And also just like a general test taking tip is like, if you're on a multiple choice section and or I guess any section really, like if there's a question you don't know the answer to, then skip it and come back to it later if you have time. Do not stay on the same question for like 5 minutes trying to figure out the answer if you haven't finished the rest of the test, because you do not have that kind of time on the APs.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for your input, and thank you for joining us at the roundtable. A special thank you to the Suffolk University Summer Youth Symposium and Professor Nicholas Frangipane for their guidance and support, as well as to Suffolk University's Director of Undergraduate Admissions, Lark Krajewski, for being willing to be interviewed. All of our sources can be found in the description box below. Thank you for joining us on the Uncertainties of University. Join us next time for a conversation on the racism and sexism that permeate the college interview process.